He shit his pants, I'm telling you, I was there. Abbas al-Barri was drunk. He'd been drunk in 1991 when they'd first met. 26 years later, he was drunk again. I'll admit he pissed himself, Lee Arnold said. And shit, I'm telling you, man, he shit his pants. I saw it and I smelt it. Lee shrugged. There was no point arguing with Abbas when he was rat-arsed. The bottle of whiskey he'd opened when Lee had arrived was half empty, and Lee didn't drink. Fucking elite Republican Guard, Abbas said. Fucking party scum. Although it still sometimes haunted his dreams, the First Iraq War was over for Lee Arnold. Since he left the army shortly after the war in 1992, he'd first joined the Metropolitan Police Force and then set up in business as a private investigator. The bloody battles against Saddam Hussein's Republican Guard were not memories he liked to invoke. But he hadn't come to this smoke-filled house in East Ham for his own amusement. Abbas was laughing, but that was only because he was shit-faced. And he was shit-faced because he was still there in his mind, all the time. On the night of the 26th of February 1991, Lee had been driving a Challenger 1 tank into battle against the 52nd Iraqi Armoured Division. As a corporal in the 7th Brigade of the British 1st Armoured Division, he'd been part of the multinational force that had been sent to recapture Kuwait from Iraqi occupation. He'd been sweaty with fear, hoarse from smoking too many fags, and he'd also had a passenger on board. One of the brigade's Iraqi interpreters, Abbas al-Barri, was a Shia dissident from the northern plain of Nineveh. He'd been arsehole before he'd even got on board. The first thing he'd ever said to Lee had been, "I'm a very bad Muslim. But what in the name of God are you to do?" They'd hit it off straight away, and when what became known as the Battle of Norfolk was over, they'd gone out drinking together in the southern Iraqi city of Basra. There, for the first time, they'd discussed how many Republican guards had pissed or shit themselves, or both. Back then, a good night out for Lee Arnold had meant a bottle of vodka and a ruck. Abbas had been handy in a fight all those years ago too. But although the drink was still in his life, the fight had gone. That had disappeared the day he'd discovered that his eldest son, Fayyaad, hadn't gone to Ibiza for a booze and birds holiday with his mates, but had joined the Islamic State group in Syria. Lee remembered that day well, because it had been the first time that Abbas had called him for years. When Lee had returned to the UK in 1992, Abbas and his family had also left Iraq. Like most of those who had translated for the Foreign Coalition, the al-Barri family would have been at risk from Saddam Hussein had they tried to stay. So Abbas, his wife Shireen, and their children Fayyaad, Jamila and Layla had been settled in a council house in East Ham. 2 years later, the al-Barri's youngest child Hassan had been born in Newham General Hospital. Lee and Abbas had wet the baby's head for 2 days of happy drunkenness. The next time they'd seen each other, Abbas's name had been all over the newspapers as the father of the latest ISIS recruit, and his drunkenness was dark. Now, it was even darker. Hassan and Lee put Abbas to bed when he finally became unconscious. The boy, unlike his mother, was embarrassed. Shireen was furious. Later, sitting down in her kitchen with Lee and a jug of strong coffee, she told him why Abbas had really wanted to see him. "We got this in the post on Monday," she said, as she pushed a large jiffy bag across the table. Addressed to Abbas, the postage stamp was Dutch. Lee opened the bag and frowned. "Ivory?" "No," Shireen said. "It's the tooth of a whale." Lee removed it. About 10 inches long, it looked like a massive incisor from a chain smoker. The surface of the tooth was rough, and when Lee held it to his nose, it smelt of damp. "So?" "Lee, may I have one of your cigarettes, please?" Shireen asked. He didn't think she smoked anymore, but he said, "Course you can, darling." He offered her a fag and took one for himself. Once her smoke was alight, Shireen said, "You know that we come from Nineveh. Do you remember?" "Yes," he said. "The Nineveh plain used to be full of all sorts of people before ISIS. She..."